land were quite content with their sunny acres. Born in Texas, they would live in Texas and die in Texas. Many hoped to stay on for the afterlife as well. This fascinated me. I transplanted myself among them, no less a convert than Sammy Davis Jr. What I hope to do today is focus real specifically on three different areas, three different issues for personal essay writers. Has anyone read either or both of the books that I suggested? Both of those books give great examples of the things I wanted to deal with today. The use of detail to bring characters and places to life, the use of humor to lighten the story and to engage the reader, and then the ways of expressing anger and pain in your writing. One was The Liars Club by Mary Karr, and you know, there's a sequel out to that now called Cherry, which is her book about her adolescence. Then the other book was A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius, which is an incredibly great title, and by Dave Eggers. And it's the story of a boy who's 21, well, it's his memoir. When he was 21 years old, both his parents died within 6 weeks of each other, and he ended up raising his 7-year-old brother. Mary Karr is a poet before she was a prose writer, and I think you can really see that in the language in The Liars Club. There's a real focus on language, and some of the stuff, I read the book a long time ago, and the things I remember the most from it are the descriptions, like of the zoo in Houston, and just little specific things like the fire in her backyard, because her language and her detail were that of a poet. Eggers, I think, is really a great example of the use of humor to tell, you know, it is a heartbreaking story, and that book is full of a very hip, ironic, self-conscious kind of humor that is sort of what I associate with the 20-somethings today. I really loved it. I really admired it. Did anyone want to make any comments about those books or just have any reactions that they'd like to share in general?
Well, I think both what Mary Karr and you had to do was talk about something very difficult, you know, a very heartbreaking, I mean, a little kid being, you know, forced to do these acts, and I think it's very interesting in memoir to be able to talk about those things and not make it so horrible that people throw down the book. And I think that's an interesting concept that I would really like to talk about and work on.
Yes, and I think that's very much my intention today, is to talk about the things that we do as writers that make other people care. You know, why do people care about your mother's death, or your bad experiences in high school, or your good, you know, or your wonderful new boyfriend, or your meal in Caracas, you know? They don't care unless you make them care, and they don't want to hear about it unless you make it some kind of enlightening, entertaining, or experience for them. And these are the things that, this is the craft of personal storytelling. So while you may not be inventing your characters or inventing your plots, because life has already handed them to you, there's still a ton of work that has to be done to make anyone interested in reading this, and to make sure that they'll take something away from it, to make, you know, what's in it for them. I mean, one of the most crushing criticisms a personal essayist or a memoirist can get, and I've gotten it in the past, is, you know, why didn't she hire a shrink and tell this to the shrink? This is what you don't want to hear. This means you have failed, or you have failed with this reader, because you haven't connected to them. They haven't. The best thing that happens to me is when somebody reads my book, and despite the fact that there's like no overlap in the details of our lives, none of the things that have happened to me have happened to them, they're going, this is me, you know? And it's like, not really, but there's somehow, I've touched that chord, you know, and I've gotten to the place where they're not thinking she needed to tell this to a psychiatrist. You know, I've made the connection, and what's happening is as resonant for that person in their life as if they've entered mine, and that's become a conduit to theirs. You know, the personal essay is not a Christmas letter. I really feel that this Christmas letter style of personal essay writing is an embarrassment to all of us. I went to get bagels, Frank was there, blah, 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 Or, on the other hand, Mom has cancer. Blah, 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 blah. It's like anything like this can become Christmas letter-esque, which I mean that it's basically a very self-involved report of the events of your life, not written in such a way or crafted in such a way as to allow access to other people, emotional access. Oh, I wanted to say one thing about the Liars Club. When I read the Liars Club, I was working on First Comes Love. And I was really challenged by that material. I wanted First Comes Love to be a novel. I wanted to change all the names. I wanted to not have to worry if I could get it exactly right, what somebody was thinking or saying or feeling. I mean, I was terrified of trying to tell the truth about that stuff because I felt like it was hard to even know what the truth was. And it seemed much safer to me to just say it was a novel, change all the names, and still tell it pretty much what happened, but not feel that obligation to the truth. Well, they wouldn't publish it that way. They said, you can write it, but, we are not sending the money. And I fought hard. I really fought hard because I was scared to death. But finally I thought, well, that they were right. That one of the important things about the story that I tell in First Comes Love is that it really did happen. And it's just much more powerful to read that book. I have had people read it and think it was a novel, and say, oh, that novel you wrote, oh. No, honey, I didn't make that up. But it definitely gained a force from being true. And that's why we care about true stories in a different way than we care about made-up stories. Plus, if you're going to write about something that really happened, but then you choose this disguise of saying that it's fiction and changing a few things, you have to ask yourself, why are you doing that? What is it that you're so afraid to confront? And are you really going to undercut the power of the work by pretending that this is fiction? And I think my publishers certainly saw that undercutting is what would happen with fiction. And they also made the good point that, a lot of people know some of the details of your life from telling. They're going to read this book and go, but this is no fiction. What's not true? And it would have become such a big deal to try to figure out what wasn't true and why I called it a novel, that would have been a further damage to the truth of the story. Okay, so I've this whole train of things I want to say, and I'm trying to remember them all. I was going to say, when I read The Liars Club, when I was working on First Comes Love, I just went, oh, God, because it was already heading up the bestseller list. And I could see that book had some things going for it that I didn't have, that made, not that Mary Karr isn't a wonderful writer, and I totally give her, credit for all her gifts, but she was telling a story of childhood. And childhood is a very accessible period. It's an easy place to bond with people. We've all been children. Even though everybody hasn't been a child in the exact same town with the exact same family, there are a lot of universals about childhood. And whenever you read or see a movie or whatever about childhood, it's really easy to push the buttons, and get people with you on this. In my case, not that many people had been married to an IV drug-abusing gay man with AIDS. So, a child is automatically it's not their fault. Whatever bad things happened to this 8-year-old Mary Karr in the Liars Club is not her fault. She was a victim of, her crazy mother, her dysfunctional family, her little town, or the bad weather, but not me. As an adult telling that story, I am responsible for every decision I made. And everything people, there's always the chance of people going, this woman is such an idiot, who even cares what happens to her? If anyone could make this many bad decisions in a row, good luck to her, and she deserves what she gets. And people did say that. But, and so when I was reading The Liars Club, I felt I could see, it's like all these things suddenly became clear to me.